You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
Packers Talk.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I'm your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans. We just love talking about the Pack. We are not getting into all the national sports media talking points and all the nonsense that they get into. We are diving into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down games during the season, and now sorting through all the draft and the rumors of the off-season. If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Follow us on all the socials, and most importantly, head on over to the Packers Talk YouTube channel and smack that subscribe button. Hit that little bell next to it for some bonus points. Certainly do us a huge favor if you could do that. We love you. And everybody that joins us, listeners, subscribers, you guys hanging out with us every week, we appreciate you. We love you. We hope you keep coming back. So tonight, we have the NFL Combine behind us. Some losers, some winners, some Gute guys. We got a few things to get into. Plenty of potential team building things going on right now. Some rumors swirling around about receivers going left and right and all over the place. So we're going to get into all that. But first, let's get a few words from our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans. You can find them on the web at ticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packers game tickets, go to PackersTalk.com/tickets, or browse their website at theticketking.com. Good evening, Tim. How we doing, sir?
Good evening, Miles. Doing good. Coming off the Combine and getting deep into draft season now. How are you?
Here we are. Yeah, I'm good, man. I think, there's some things shaking out now. We're figuring out who can do what, getting a few measurables on the board, getting some size on the board, figuring out maybe some guys are not hitting that threshold. Maybe there are some freaks out there. A little bit of both. So, yeah, I thought it was a pretty interesting combine. Definitely think that there were some guys that came out of it rising boards. And we'll catch a few of those. Unfortunately, there are a few, I think, that fell down some boards. And I think a few of the Gute guys became more clear. At least a couple, But I don't know who, let's get into it, man. Who were your winners here at the Combine? What did you get most excited about?
Well, I think it just confirmed the edge rushers and the defensive tackles class that we've been talking about, how deep it is and how talented they are. It just confirmed it for those that actually worked out. But the measurements, the testing numbers, there's some really good athletes. There's some freak athletes. And it's good. Both positions are going to be deep, especially along that interior defensive line. So it was nice to see that. I mean, I think we both knew that going in. I think everybody knew that. And there's a few guys that didn't test that hopefully will test at their pro days coming up. But yeah, I think it confirmed that there's a lot of guys to get on the defensive line. And, if they don't get one in the first round, I think that's okay. Cause there's going to be guys going in the second, third round, even into the third day of the draft that are going to be able to help you pretty quickly. So yeah, that was probably the biggest confirmation for me. Just being able to see, some of the numbers they put up, and just how big, how long they are, and just the way you see them move, and it's like incredible to watch these 300+ pound guys move so effortlessly and just with amazing athletic ability. It's unbelievable. But yeah, that they stood out. We can go down the list. I mean, offensive line, I think there were a few guys. There's some questions about arm length. Again, we run in that every year. But I thought there were a few offensive linemen. The kid from Missouri, Membo, he's incredible. I mean, I think he was, a top 10 or top 15 pick coming in, and he just confirmed it. I think, you could talk about Gute guys. He's probably one of them. I just don't think they're going to have a shot to get him, but he looked incredible, and the way he measured up was awesome. And I think think there might be a couple receivers that are Packer guys. One in particular that, since I saw him at the Senior Bowl, really liked him and saw a little bit of film on him, really like that. And then what he did at the combine was more impressive. He put up better numbers than I was expecting. That's Jaden Higgins, Iowa State. So I don't think it's real deep at receiver as far as guys that are going to hit all the thresholds the Packers like, but he's one that he does, and he looked great. And we knew he had the size. We know he runs really good routes, but the athletic ability really showed up in Indianapolis. And I think he would be the perfect second-round Packer receiver that they always end up with. But I think there's a chance now with what he's tested at and people getting to see him at the Senior Bowl. I think there's a chance he slips into the bottom of round one. But yeah, he's for me of the, realistic. They're not going to get McMillan from Arizona most likely, but
right, no,
I think he's the guy that fits them. I think they may like Luther Burton, and Matthew Golden's another one that tested wonderfully. The speed, the athletic ability, but he's 5'11", 190 some pounds, or around 200. He seems like he's kind of size-wise what Jaden Reed is, or close enough to it. And how many of those guys are the Packers going to want? So really like him, like the film, like the speed, like the athletic ability, but I don't know if he's enough of their guy for them to take him. I think Jaden Higgins is. So I think he's one of those realistic Packer wide receiver targets, and I think he fits what they like to get for an outside receiver. I thought he was really good in the combine, and it just continues. He had a great season for Iowa State, was really good Senior Bowl, and now in Indianapolis at the combine, followed all that up. He's had a great offseason. So those are my winners. I know we threw a bunch at you there, but there were some guys that had good weeks. We'll get to the guys in a little bit that disappointed us maybe, or that we were expecting more from. But yeah, I thought that especially that defensive front, they just confirmed what everybody's been talking about, that there's a bunch of dudes up front. And we didn't even see all of them work out, unfortunately. But there's a bunch of guys up there, and Packers should have their pick of guys, not only at 23, but going in the second and third round. So how about you? Who are some of the guys that really caught your eye this week that you think maybe improve their stock or, move themselves up a little bit?
Well, one of the first ones I mentioned, you mentioned Membu. He's definitely one that comes to mind, and I'll touch on him in just a second. But the first one that jumped out to me was Shamar Stewart, and his RAS score came out and jumped off the page with a 9.99. And this guy, he's 6'5", 267, comes out and puts up a 4.6 40. I mean, that's just
crazy.
Good Lord. And not only that, I mean, maybe even more impressive than the 40 is a 40-inch vertical and a 10-plus foot, almost 11-foot broad jump. I mean, the explosion in that is just off the charts, man. Like, if you need an explosive player, that's your guy right there. That you don't get more explosive than that. If they do, show them to me. But that's just that guy. And this is where it can really make a difference, because obviously he doesn't have as much production. And I think that was the knock on him. But that position specifically, the edge position in the NFL, freaks win. Freaks are the ones that win. It's not necessarily that you have to have had production in college. If you are an athletic freak, you can go from not having done much in college to really doing well in the NFL. So
I'm sorry. I was just going to say he's a Packer type. Like, they probably love him. They probably love him. And yeah, but then you look at the production, he had 4.5 sacks in, his college career. Like, what happened? Like, how can you not get to the quarterback? And on film, he's getting pressures. It's just he cannot finish the plays. So is that fixable? Is it going to change in the NFL? But you bet on the traits, you bet on the athletic ability, and oh my God, does he have it? Like, he's a freak. But where's the disconnect? Like, why can't he actually get the quarterback down?
Yeah, and I think that's where you got to go back to the tape. You got to look at each of those games and try to see, is he getting beat? or is it just circumstantial? You know, he's getting a lot of hurries, but he's not getting a lot of sacks. And we'll get there. I've looked at it a little bit, and it does look a lot like he's getting penetration. He's winning battles, but he's just not getting all the way home. Sure, you have questions about that. And you know what? I hope those questions drop that guy all the way to the 23rd pick, because that would be fantastic. For a team that needs edge help, pass rush help, however you want to define it, and we had some good conversations about that this season. Yeah. This is a guy that fits that mold. And so to draw kind of a little bit of perspective on this, when we call this guy a Gute guy or a Packers guy, what's the difference between him and, say, a Mike Green, right? Well, the Packers expect these guys, these edge rushers, to be big enough to play against the run. This guy is that. He's almost 270 pounds, probably could play at 270, 275 if he wanted to. He's going to be able to hold his own and set the edge. And that's the type of guy that they are looking for on the edge versus a Mike Green, who's just barely 250 soaking wet. And that's not a knock against him because he's got the production, right? I mean, he's an excellent football player. His size does not appear to be a disadvantage. I mean, he had an insane performance at the Senior Bowl, and he had plenty of strength wins with that, right? He wasn't just winning with speed off the edge. Right. So, but we all are getting to the point where we're really understanding how the Packers work and operate and read these guys. This is one of those guys. He is smack dab in the middle of their radar. I do not believe that with traits like this, he'll be able to make it down to 23, even with the lack of production. Nice. There's just too many teams up there that are willing to bet on the traits. If he does, it is going to be very difficult for them to not hit the button on this guy. And how great is that to pair him up with Cooper?
Yeah, I would be shocked if he was there at 23 and they didn't take him. I would think he's their kind of guy. And then, of course, the big question will be obviously the lack of production and why did that happen? So I think a lot of people would go nuts about that. But I agree with you. I can't see him getting that far down. Somebody's going to take him. I think, whether he's top 10, top 15, whatever, but somebody's definitely going to take him and bet on the traits and the upside and all the ability that he obviously has and try to figure out a way to help him finish these plays and get the quarterback down. But yeah, he put on a show. A lot of people were expecting that going in, but it was he more than lived up to it.
Absolutely. And a quick one from our buddy R Showers here. The Iowa State receiver running 4.47 at that size. Need a big dude like that. Guy. Did you guys see what Golden did? I didn't see it. Golden had a pretty impressive performance as well.
Are you saying Gadsden, the tight end from Syracuse?
Oh, Gadsden. Excuse me. I'm used to reading the Golden. Yeah. Gads. That is one that's worth looking into. He's got good size. He will be a great weapon. I mean, he was at the Shrine Bowl, so I got to see him up close and personal, and he definitely lives up to it.
I don't think. Sorry, I'm looking it up. I don't think he worked out, to be honest. He might have measured in, but didn't work out.
I thought he did. Okay. Let's just do this.
If he did, I'm not saying.
All right. So Golden did work out. That's not the question. I'm going to get his on the side here.
Yeah, he didn't.
So Gadsden didn't work out?
Nope. He did a vertical and a broad jump, but he didn't run. So he didn't run or do the agilities, but he's almost 6'5", 243.
Okay.
And his his vertical and the broad jumps are good, but he didn't do anything else.
So that's slightly undersized for a tight end at 243. I will say again, I saw him up close at the Shrine Bowl. He doesn't look it. He looks plenty big enough. I mean, he is at 6'5". That's a big dude. I would have no doubt that the NFL could put another 10 pounds on him without it being a problem. But 34-inch broad jump, a 9.6 broad jump and a 34-inch vertical jump. Not terrible numbers for a big guy like that. They're not. I don't think he's moving his draft position at this point. I think if teams like him, they still like him. If they don't, they're probably not any more interested than they were. But he's an interesting one to watch. And then, some other guys that I, I thought were winners. Nick Eman-Worry. I hope I said that right.
Yeah, there's some tough names to pronounce in this draft.
Yeah. So, and I got to remember, is he a safety? Because I was seeing
he's a safety at like 223 or 225, whatever he came in measured at. Yeah, he's gigantic.
So here we go. Safety. This is a guy that I think if he's there, you got to find a way to use him. You know, I don't know what that looks like. But 6'3", 220, and he comes in running a 4.38 with a 1.49 10-yard split, which is very impressive, definitely above average. A 43-inch vertical is just insane. Like, I mean, he's just flying at that point. And same thing with the 11.6 broad jump. That's just out of this world. So again, explosion. You got that's like the most explosive player you've ever seen at the combine. Him and Shamar Stewart, like you got your explosion right there if that's what you need.
Yeah.
So yeah, big accomplishment I think for him. You know, definitely in a less exciting safety group, he's getting himself out there. Not to say that there's not value out there. It's just not to be excited about. So yeah, Nick Eman-Worry, I thought really did a great job. And then again, Aran Mimbu, we're all over names. Mr. Mimbu, I had to go back and try to put this into perspective for myself. And, so I remember the big deal that everybody made about BJ Raji and his athleticism at the combine for his size. So just to give you guys some perspective, if you're not old enough to have remembered that, making me feel like an old guy, which was not that long ago. BJ Raji came in weighing 337 pounds, pretty close to Mimbu. Mimbu's 332. And BJ Raji ran a 5.23 and he jumped 32 inches in the vertical jump. Everybody thought that was awesome. I remember like that was like super impressive. And he had a good career with the Packers. Definitely more athletic than he looked. And then Armand comes in here and runs virtually at the same weight, 5 pounds lighter, 4.91, almost a 4.8, 34-inch vertical, a 9.7 broad jump. I mean, dude, moving 330 pounds like that is just incredible. So hats off to that man. I think he's going to be an excellent offensive lineman, probably
he's
guard,
really good.
If I had to guess.
I think he's a tackle. A right tackle for sure. Maybe
you could be either one.
I think he's a tackle.
Could be either one with that athleticism. Personally, the way I see that is good. A pulling guard, man. A guy with that kind of athleticism. I want him being, all over the place and setting things up for the run. But yeah, I mean, excellent performance for him. So those are my three that were just absolute combine winners. There's definitely some other noteworthy ones. I mentioned Deontay Thornton, the receiver from Tennessee. He's 6'5", ran a 4.3 flat 40. Trying to pull up his other measurables here. Why am I having to go so far down for him?
Maybe he was incomplete. I'll give you a couple while you're looking them up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple offensive linemen. The two kids out of Georgia who Tate Ratledge, Jarrett Wilson.
Yes.
Wilson's the center, Ratledge is the guard. Didn't know much about them. I'm going to have to go back and do some research on those guys because, they were both near 10 RAS scores. Really, really good. Didn't know, like I said, I didn't know them well coming in, but they, started for Georgia.
That's something.
That's something. And obviously Wilson's a center, position of need most likely for the Packers. 6'3", 310. That's not huge, but for a center, that's decent size. And an RAS score of 9.98. He ran a 4.84, which is incredible for an offensive lineman. Yeah, elite explosion, elite speed. It's obviously with offensive linemen, it's not about speed so much. Like you don't want them running 40 yards anyway.
That 10-yard split is definitely something that they pay attention to.
Yeah, and it was 1.72 for that's Jarrett Wilson. So I think Wilson and Ratledge are a couple guys. Go back and let's learn more about those guys because Packers like athletic offensive linemen. Those guys were tested very athletically, so hopefully the film backs it up. But yeah, they stood out. And I thought some of the running backs, I know it's not really a position of need for the Packers. Maybe they take one, at some point late on day 3, but there's some running backs that were surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly,
Good value.
but yeah. And I think it's a pretty good class of running backs. The kid from North Carolina, Hampton, holy cow. He's a big dude.
Class.
Yeah, he's big and he can run. And then Quinshon Junkins from Ohio State. I mean, they have 2 running backs there, Junkins and Henderson. I actually thought Junkins was better at Ole Miss, and then he transferred into Ohio State, and I kind of thought he was okay at Ohio State, but wow, his explosion and his speed was, for a guy his size in the 220s, really impressive. So yeah, it's probably not a draft where the Packers are going to take a running back unless it's something, they like somebody on day 3, because I think they're okay there. But if you need a running back, there's some good players on day 2 and day 3. It's a deeper draft and a more athletic draft, a little more athletic class than I imagined.
Absolutely. And there's names pretty far down the list, that that's one thing that we've talked about pretty consistently is in these classes where there are clearly deeper classes at a position, definitely expect Gute to go fishing at that position. D tackle, obviously we've talked about that a lot. But the running back class goes right along with it. And, it's hard to gauge because you haven't really had obviously deep running back classes like this very often recently. There's been some guys that come out that are good, and then you find some, hidden gems that end up showing up. But this is just a deep class, whereas you're talking about like day 2, day 3, you could be having a shot at guys that would be worth a, late first, early second round pick in other cases. Judkins is one, as far as the athletic list goes here on the NFL's combine page, he's 5th down, and if we go look, let's see here, Brugler's list to see where he's at on the running backs.
989 RAS. I mean,
so Judkins is like the 5th or 6th running back, it seems like, in a pretty consensus way.
Like
that's a guy that on another day or in another class, he should be easily a day 2 guy, I would think. Judkins here, he might find his way to day 3.
Yeah, I could see round 3 or 4, something like that. Yeah, depending on
a guy like that. I mean, that's your model right there. That's the size guy that they like, that Josh Jacobs is, that 6 foot, 220, 225, but athletic and just good instincts. I mean, he's got good PFF grades the last 3 seasons. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to be said about this running back class. And even further beyond that, RJ Harvey got a lot of attention. Damian Martinez out of Miami is one to keep an eye on. There's a lot of names on this list as you go down. So that'll be one. I think it would be hard to imagine them coming out of this draft without a running back, to be honest with you.
It could be. I mean, I think that's going to be, again, I think it's going to be a late day 3 thing, but I could see them doing it. Yeah. There's enough guys. They could definitely do that. I mean, if you look, we don't know what Marshawn Lloyd's going to be because he was hurt, but they're going to give him a lot of opportunity. He was a 3rd-round pick last season. So, and then I think Chris Brooks was a really nice pickup, had a good year for him. Emmanuel Wilson had a good year for him as well. But I don't, they're not tied to those guys long term, right? Like, I mean, they both played well, but I think they kind of are what they are. They're depth running backs, 2nd and 3rd team running backs. So yeah, I mean, it's possible they like somebody there, especially somebody with some speed, home run ability on day 3. Yeah, they might take a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, day 3 is kind of a fun day to think about because that's your day to go find, some hidden gems, find some guys where it's like, we got a decent running back room, but Ollie Gordon's still out there. Taj Brooks still out there. I mean, there's some guys that are, ready to go compete in the NFL that are going to be there on day 3, so that's a fun one to look at, and we'll dive deeper into that. I mean, obviously at the top you got Ashton Genty. We won't be anywhere near him. But yeah, I mean, after that, it's kind of open season on the rest of them. I think any one of them is up for grabs, and there's a lot to consider there. our our friend Daryl, man, he's in there listing a few names and some of their results. Appreciate you, man. He calls out Tez Johnson was 5'9", 164, and
He
ran a
wasn't even.
4.5.
I think he was in the 150s. Actually, I don't even think he was 164.
Yeah, that's talk about a guy that definitely fell down some boards, and we're not on the losers section yet. I don't like spending a lot of time on losers anyway, but yeah, that one's a tough one. Like, dang, man, that's hard to look at a guy like that and just think that he's ready for the NFL.
He's definitely not a good guy. I mean, he's just way
Not a
too
good guy.
small. He's way too small, and if you're going to be that small, you better be blazing fast. And it's weird because he played real fast at Oregon, but yeah,
That's not good. Yeah,
that's not good at all. Somebody will take him. He's not.
Oh yeah, he'll
undraftable,
get
but
drafted. He'll
yeah,
fall though.
he's not coming to Green Bay.
No. We need to. Maybe we should create like an anti-Goot guy list.
That's a good idea.
That might be an easier list to make at this point. But yeah, and so there's definitely some guys that didn't do themselves any favors this week, which is unfortunate. But here we are. Tez Johnson, one of those guys for sure. There was a few receivers, and actually, as I started going back and looking at Thornton, Thornton ran a great 40, but he actually might have hurt himself with some of his other testing. It looked like his vertical was pretty disappointing. There's definitely some guys in the receiver group that set themselves back with slow 40s. And listen, I'm the first one that's going to step up and be like, Jerry Rice ran a 4.7. So I'm not here to tell these guys what they can't do, because they ran a slow 40. But when you're splitting hairs and you're having to figure out who's what, and this guy runs a 4.3 and you run a 4.6, dang, man, like it's hard not to pick the guy that ran a 4.3, when everything else is equal. And in a lot of these cases it is. So that's the part for me that kind of stinks for some of these guys that, that couldn't run well. Our buddy Daryl, he got another one. Ricky White, he ran real slow. Ricky White's one that had some good hype coming in. He was at the Shrine Bowl. He had a decent performance at the Shrine Bowl. But yeah, it just, that kind of thing it's disappointing. I don't want to bring too much attention to guys and all that in a negative way. But like, something that will probably bring more negative attention than positive is someone like Dante Thornton running a 4.3, which is fantastic, but then jumping a 33-inch vertical. And guys, I'm 5'10", and I had a 33-inch vertical. All right. White boy. Like, come on. Like, you got to do better than that. And maybe he had a bad day, whatever it may be, but this is your job interview. You can't just say I had a bad day. Like, you got to get in there and you got to get after it. So yeah, I think stuff like that is going to raise questions. He's also 205 at 6'5", which is a pretty skinny 6'5".
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think the receivers were probably the group to me that lost the most, just because there's so many guys that have done well, and that there's just a giant cluster of guys who look very similar. So you're splitting hairs now. And again, like, it's just, when you're in that position, the 40 time does matter. The bench maybe does matter. Maybe your measurables do matter a little bit. Being a couple inches taller, or a few pounds heavier, that makes all the difference between being a second round pick and a sixth round pick. But plenty of 6th round picks make it in the NFL regardless of their measurables. So, this is just your ticket in. It's not a end all be all. What other losers did you have, man? Did you have any big guy losers?
Well, I think you did a really good job with the receivers. There were just, other than Jaden Daniels and I guess his teammate Jalen Noel, who's probably not a Packer guy anyway because he's a slot receiver, and he's not real small, but he's a smaller size slot receiver. We already have a slot receiver. I don't think he's a Packer. I don't think he's going to be a Packer. I don't think he would be, highly rated by them. But there were very few receivers that stood out or separated themselves. I don't think McMillan even tested, or maybe he did it. I don't know.
He doesn't have anything to gain by testing.
Yeah,
he's
so
posting those YouTube videos of him catching the ball.
Yeah, there's just nobody stepped up other than Higgins, who I thought was really good and continued a strong off season. He had a strong regular season too when they were actually playing the game. So the film's good too. But yeah, nobody really stood out there. I think I was disappointed by the amount of guys who either didn't test at all or only did certain things. Maybe they got measured, maybe they did the vertical and the broad, but they didn't do any of the agility or speed, or they did a 40-yard dash, didn't do anything. And I know it's kind of like trending that way, and they want to go to their pro days where everything's kind of their environment and controlled. And like, and I get it. And especially for the guys at the top of the draft, it's like, you don't have a whole lot to gain by doing any testing. But it was disappointing because there's a lot of guys that were still don't have the full numbers on. And to really, like, from our perspective, we're going to be talking about from now through the draft, like, who are the guys that the Packers really would want to draft, because we know there's size measurements that they need to hit at certain positions or most positions. And there's also certain testing numbers that they typically draft. And we don't have all that information. And now it's going to be kind of trickling in from pro days. And then you're going to guys that say, you know what, I'm not even running or doing certain things at my pro day. So that's frustrating. And I, other than that, you mentioned the receivers. I think some of the offensive linemen, again, nobody really. Membu was awesome. We talked about the Georgia kids, but
he's like the one who had a performance, and the rest of them was kind of like, meh.
Yeah, like maybe it's confirming kind of what they already were, like the first round guys or those guys that are borderline first round. Like Will Campbell's going to go before the Packers pick, most likely. Right. He's got good size, but he's got the short arm, and short arms, and that's going to come down to that short arm argument that everybody debates every year. But some of the other guys, Banks from Texas, who I kind of like, but I don't think he helped himself. I don't think he necessarily hurt himself.
Yeah, his testing was just kind of average. I'm looking at it right now, and it's average numbers. Now, that's average in relativity, right? Like, he's 315 pounds, and he has a 32-inch vertical. Like, that's impressive. That's just physically impressive as a human being. But in the grand scheme of all of this, it doesn't really stand out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think there's a whole lot of offensive linemen. I'm talking about, day one, day two guys that really stood out in a good way, and that's disappointing. I think there's guys that are good players, so you go back to the film. There's also some guys that didn't test or physically. Josh Simmons, he's still recovering, so he couldn't test. So we'll see, as those guys hopefully test at the pro day, we get the numbers to confirm. But yeah, there was nobody on the offensive line that stood out. And then I think cornerback, there was a little bit good. It was nice to see Siobhan Revelle and Benjamin Morrison both recovering from injury. So they couldn't test, but they hit the size measurements of the Packers, the size thresholds above 190. So that's good. That's a start. We probably won't see either one of them test at all because of their injuries. They're not going to be ready before the draft. But other than that, again, I think at cornerback, you didn't really have anybody stand out. Darian Porter from Iowa State tested great. He's got good size and all that. But then you go back to, he played 6 years in college, and he really wasn't a starter until his last year. He was a receiver, and then he was in and out of the line. And so how come you weren't already a starter? How come you weren't in the draft last year or the year before? And it took you this, like, what happened? So you got to figure that out. Is he good enough? Does the film match what his athletic numbers were? And I'm not sure it's going to. But that was just another position, cornerback, kind of like offensive line, where you didn't really have guys step up and separate themselves and really stand out.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's not that these guys are bad or that they bombed this thing, so now they'll never be anything. It's not any of that. It's just that they didn't stand out. Nobody, in some of these groups, you didn't get anything to separate these guys like you'd want. Even like some of the DBs, like we were saying, like Kobe Bryant's a guy that I've been kind of a fan of, right, since the Shrine Bowl, and he came out and he ran a 4.5 and didn't do anything else. It's like, all right, well, you're an undersized guy, and I would have loved to have seen what you could do on your 3-cone, on your vertical. Like, how are you going to overcome the size thing? Right? Vertical, you can overcome by being able to jump, 3-cone, you can overcome with being able to change direction. Like, there's different ways to demonstrate that. Now, the guy's done a great job again, with the Shrine Bowl, he proved everything he had to prove with the physicality, but just stuff like that. Like you want to see guys come out and separate themselves a little bit more. So it was kind of, I don't know, I would say an underwhelming overall combine with the exceptions that we've already listed. But the combine doesn't need to be the end all be all. Like you're saying, these guys now, and whether we like it or not, they're saying, nah, I'll do it at my pro day, and if the scouts don't like that, then they've got to have some kind of say in all this to say, hey, get these guys going back to the combine and really competing there. But otherwise, the players are going to do what they want to do, as long as they can get away with it. So, I look at this, the combine, you got to take it, I guess, with somewhat of a grain of salt, but it does provide a benchmark. The size is probably one of the better things, right? Like you get real official sizes here at the combine. No more of this roster padding stuff. Oh, this guy's 5'10", but let's call him 6 foot, that kind of thing. You get to figure out who's who there, and that's a good thing to have. But overall in this one, I felt like there was a lot left to be desired. Another one that I did see as a winner, and I didn't get to, I forgot to mention this one, is Maxwell Hairston. Came out, ran a 4.28. Whew, that's hot. And had a 39.5 vertical, 10.9 broad. That's an athletic dude right there. But again, he's 5'11", 183. So are the Packers considering him? Probably not. So it's that kind of draft right now. Like, do you see a guy like, oh, I like that one, and you're like, man, maybe not.
Mm-hmm. I got one more for you too before we move on that I wanted to shout out, and it kind of backs up what you and I are saying, because I think you and I both agree that we really like this guy, and I think there's a chance he's there at 23, and I also think the Packers would love it, and he would be their pick potentially. That's Derek Harmon from Oregon. The production, he was great on tape. 6'4.5", 313, ran a 4.9 40. I don't care that much about a 40, but the testing numbers backed up the size, which backed up all the production we saw from him. So, yeah, he's a really good player, but he's definitely not good enough to go in the first 22 picks.
I agree. Totally agree. In fact,
you can't take him in the top 22.
I would say that this is kind of like, look, if we're going to have some fun, and we always make comparisons to the previous Super Bowl winners and, Ted Thompson, what he built in 2010 and all that, this could be like a new age BJ Raji pick. This guy is very athletic. He's bigger than BJ Raji as far as his height goes. He's not as heavy, so he's got more athleticism, but he can be very disruptive on the D-line in a lot of ways. And from what I've, seen and listened to, I've gone back and watched a little bit of YouTube videos on him, and I've listened to a few of his interviews from Oregon. He just sounds like a good leader to me. He sounds like a dude that doesn't take any crap. He sounds like a dude that expects the most out of his teammates. But yeah, he really sounds like he carries himself. And I think that that's something to pay attention to, because that's the character is something the Packers really value highly. You can't overlook that. If there's these guys that have character issues or something, anything like that, the Packers just aren't going to waste their time, and they just don't have to anymore. Like there's a time that you used to be like, well, he's kind of a dick, but he's a great athlete, and you just don't have to do that anymore. It's like, well, this guy's a stand-up human being, and he's a great athlete, so we'll just take that one. So Derek Harmon strikes me as that. Like, he really does seem like a strong character guy, but also would be a great piece to plug into this defense. The production, like you're saying, he had, let me go back to his hurries. He had like a ridiculous amount of hurries.
He was always in the backfield
last year.
And I think, when we get to the point down the road a little bit here, and we're going to do our draft crushes, I think we're going to be fighting over him, or we're both just going to have him on our list. Because I'm with you right there. I totally agree. You see a little BJ Raji at a different size. I see a little Colin Jenkins, if you want to talk about the Super Bowl team. I can see that a little bit, right? Yeah, but he moves really well too for a guy that's that size. So Yeah, you plug him into the middle with Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt. Damn, you're getting pressure up the middle.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. No, he's got, to me, he seems like he's got the full package. I guess I won't claim to be some kind of great scouting expert, but just size, athletic ability, character, production. He checks a lot of boxes. And from that angle, maybe he doesn't make it to 23, man. He might just be one of those that's, NFL teams are just sitting there trying to be quiet about, hoping that he gets overlooked until they're on the clock. But yes, I thought he did himself some favors with that 40 time, and he didn't have anything else that he did, right? If I saw it correctly.
I think he just ran the 40.
Yeah, I think he just ran the 40.
Yeah.
So it'll be good to keep an eye on his pro day, see what he does, in the, with some like the lifting and stuff like that. If you can get a vertical or a broad out of him to figure out that explosion, I'd be really interested in that. But yeah, I do like that one. And he did himself a great service just by doing that. So now, we've gone through the combine. We got a few more guys here in the comments. Let's see. We got a couple of comments coming on. Man, you guys are flying over here. Our friend Bill Patz, it's good to see you, Bill. If there was a new drill for any position group that you would like to see, what would that be? Good question.
Yeah, it's really good.
I really love what the gauntlet does for receivers. I would like to see some incorporation of DBs to that. I would like, maybe you do the gauntlet without DBs once to just get the receivers running through, but then you add the DBs as like, now this is their gauntlet drill, and the receiver is kind of secondary to that, for them running with to try to disrupt and break up pass. I think I'd like to see something like that. What do you think, Tim?
That's a good one. I would just like to see like more. They're never going to do it, but when you do a quarterback drill, can we have like somebody rushing, not getting close, but like rushing the quarterback, getting him off his spot and making him kind of throw with a little bit of movement, and where he's got to, move around back there, and it's not just everything clean for him. Something like that. Something like put a corner in front of some of these receivers when they're running their patterns. Like, let's see how these guys react when there's a little bit of unknown, where they're not getting to run in the straight line. I know they're not going to touch or be physical, and that's fine. That's not what the combine is, but like these guys know what to expect coming in. They've tested, these guys are working out, doing these drills ahead of time, which is great, and they should be doing that. But like maybe throw some drills in there that kind of see how they react, see how they do on their toes. Yeah, it would probably make more guys not test, but I don't know. That's just me. Some of these drills are too easy.
Oh, I like that. I'd like to see a little bit more competition built into the combine, and it doesn't have to be too physical, but like one thing that I really enjoyed watching when we were out at the Shrine Bowl is they were doing a lot of the punt coverage drills, and to the average person that's probably very boring, but the punt coverage drills, one thing that is just very, very raw competition, right? Because you got the guys that are on the edges. One's going down trying to make the tackle, the other's trying to stop them, and it is just full speed running, trying to compete. And you get a feel for who's got that dog in them a little bit, versus who's just going to try to get through it. I'd like to see more of that, but it's hard to do without pads. So, but good question, Bill. Appreciate you, sir. And then our showers comes in. I got an observation. The cornerbacks are few and far between. We do play a lot of zone, probably third and fourth round, and take a couple. Yeah, this is the interesting point here. And, I might take this as an opportunity to just, have another little call out about our current situation. But yeah, you're right. There's few and far between corners in this. There's some opportunities. There's some value at cornerback in this draft, but unless you're going to go up and make a move for one of those top guys, I just don't know that beyond that there's a lot to look forward to here. I certainly, if I was a GM looking at the free agent class that is currently in front of us, wouldn't be in a hurry to get rid of any bodies without compensation I was really happy with. Certainly wouldn't be cutting any of them. Not my most talented one. Because there's just not much to replenish with, right? Like if you guys want to get rid of Jaire Alexander, do it in a different offseason. Shouldn't do it in this offseason because there's just not a lot left to replenish with. So keep that in mind. I do believe that will keep Jaire Alexander on this team until after the draft. If he's not going to be on this team, I think they will wait until after the draft, see what they can get out of it, and then say, all right, we got what we wanted. We're happy with this. Let's move Jaire. Or we didn't. We need the body. He's projected to be healthy. Let's keep him. That projected to be healthy is totally, I don't know. That's just me spitballing here. But if he is, you want to keep him. So anyway, just for food for thought there. Food for thought. In case do you need any rebuttals there, Tim? I know you are on the other side of this than I am.
I'm on the other side. I think, yeah, he can't get on the field. He doesn't play, and that's what this is. And that's the only reason, or not the only reason, but that's the main reason. I don't think he's coming back, and I think I don't know if we'll be by the next time we have our podcast a week from now, but it'll be by the start of free agency or shortly thereafter. They'll be moving on. And yeah, to go back to the corners, I don't think it's a great class of corners. I think they add probably one or two. I still think there's a chance they take one in the first or second round as well, but I think they're going to add, and I think they're going to go out and get somebody in free agency as well. And, in comparison to Jaire, will that player be as good? No. But Jaire's on the field for 14 games the last 2 years. If you get somebody that's going to be available and Jaire's not, I take the guy that's available. And that's what it comes down to. He's just going back to 2021 when he got that initial shoulder injury, which kind of started this, endless cycle of injuries. He just hasn't been available enough. And, with the salary they're paying him, you can't have that. You just can't count on the guy. So a healthy Jaire, yeah, that's great, but we haven't seen that in a long time. So, I don't expect him back, and I understand it. So I hope they can get something for him. I'm not expecting much if they do, which kind of sucks, but it's the contract and it's everybody knowing that they're moving on. So, it's a tough situation, but I understand it from the Packers' perspective because you got to have guys available. It's kind of like what we saw with Bakhtiari. He just couldn't stay healthy, and at some point you just got to kind of loose and move on.
Well, I think that's what this really hinges on. And of course, as we really, we've said before, the Packers know more about this situation than anybody, right? They know more about his health and all of that. If the questions about his health are lingering the way that Bakhtiari's were, yeah, you gotta part ways. If you got that many question marks around whether the guy can come back this next season, you definitely need to part ways. If he's on track to be healthy, and he's still in Green Bay this offseason, right? Like that's also a big deal, right? That's kind of a leadership move to stay in Green Bay in the offseason. You don't see that from everybody. That usually
is he there? I don't.
Yeah, Gute said he was. Yeah, I was. Right after our episode last week, I went back and tried to find other interviews with Gute, and he did a local. And I think you called this out. He did a local interview time at the Combine before that full press conference. And in that, he mentioned, I think it was in that, he mentioned that Jaire was still in Green Bay. It's things like that make me think he's not going anywhere. Because and your argument, Tim, is fair, right? You're under the assumption that he's just having a hard time getting healthy. And, again, if he's got the questions like Bakhtiari did, then that makes sense. Where you lose me is this assumption, and not you, but anybody, is this assumption that, the team and the player are mad at each other. I just don't see that. I think that maybe that's an easy thing to assume when the player can't get on the field. But the biggest sign that that's not the case, and we talked about this before, is the amount of time it took him to actually go on IR. And I think people get kind of upset about that. But what that is him trying to play. If he was not interested in playing, if he had a bad attitude, you'd go on IR as fast as possible. Oh, my hamstring, doc, I can't play, like that kind of thing. And I know hamstring injuries, I probably shouldn't have said that. That's a buzzword in this organization. But you get the point, right? You kind of milk the injury and get what you can out of it, and you go on IR as early as you can, and you have your agent do the rest, and you get out of town. And that's just not what Jaire did, and so I don't see the bad attitude side of it. I just totally reject that. I think that the only bad attitude he has is towards Packers media that was kind of crappy to him while he was trying to get back and get healthy, assuming that he had a bad attitude. It's like, well, no, the guy's trying to do his job. He's trying to get back. And so we've seen him troll the media before. That's not a new thing. So I just kind of reject the bad attitude thing. But the injury thing, I think, is the biggest question mark. And if your assumption is true, which is he's got still question marks around the injury, and the team, just based on all context, doesn't believe he can get healthy to a point, where they need him to be, then yeah, I think, like I said, that's the point where you do move on. It's responsible. It's just the right move. I don't know that I believe that's the case, right? He's 28 years old. And the biggest thing, and this may just be a big old fat outlier, and that's fine. But the biggest thing that gets my attention about this is comparisons to the past in Charles Woodson. And I felt like there were very, very similar attitudes about Charles Woodson from the Raiders before he came to the Packers. And we all know what he did when he got to the Packers. He flipped a big old bird to the Raiders and said, I'm going to win Defensive Player of the Year because I'm still good. I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see Jaire get jettisoned from the Packers with, big middle fingers flying, and then go off and win Defensive Player of the Year for the 49ers or somebody. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, I get what you're saying. I just think he's played like 51% of the games since 2021. He's had 1 year where he played 16 games. Everything else was really short seasons, either 7 games, or I think 2021 was 4 games. Like it's just a pattern. And he's a smaller guy who, I don't know, every time he tries to make a tackle, he's throwing his shoulder in there. You hold your breath. At least I do. I think the injuries, I hope he stays healthy wherever he goes in his career. I don't want to root for injuries, but I think it's going to be a recurring thing for him. I don't think he's physically going to hold up. And just 2 quick points. I don't think there's necessarily like hatred on either side, the Packers or Jaire, but there's frustration. And Gute said that twice now in his press conference, that the organization's frustrated and Jaire's frustrated. Yeah. And it's a weird situation that he got hurt. He came back. He's practicing in full for several weeks. And why can't he play in a game? And when they would ask LaFleur, he wouldn't give you nothing. Like, oh, he's just not ready. Well, if he's ready enough that he's practicing, not even limited capacity, he's practicing 3 days a week in full, what's the holdup? And you never really got an answer. And then it became, you see him, okay, now he's back to limited. Now he's getting shut down for surgery. So something was going on there. I don't know if it was a disagreement about treatment, a disagreement about having the surgery or not, whatever it was, something was off there. And, we don't know what that impact is on how they feel about him inside the building, but just something was off. And then the only other thing I'll say is Tom Silverstein reported at the Combine that they haven't even gone to his agent to ask him for a pay cut. So that tells me if they're not even going to him for a pay cut, there's no way you can bring him back on his salary cap hit based on playing 14 games over the last 2 years. If they wanted him back, they would be trying to work out some kind of new deal, some kind of pay cut or, moving money around on his contract. And if they haven't even done that yet, kind of means like they're moving on. Like that ball would be, move at this time last year. They knew they had to adjust Aaron Jones's contract, and they were working to try to do that. And they ended up deciding like, we can't figure out the numbers and we're just going to let you cut you loose. But they're not even doing that right now. So yeah, it just seems like all signs are pointing to them moving on. I hope they can get something for him. I wouldn't expect much if they get anything because everybody knows they're going to be cutting him loose. But and I agree with you. It's going to suck if he goes to the Vikings or the Lions, and he has a healthy season and plays really well, plays like he's capable of. That's going to suck to see that, but it's the risk you got to take, and it's just not the right situation right now for the Packers based on his lack of availability and not meeting his cap number in his contract. That's part of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so these are the things where we kind of can look at it and go, well, maybe this means this, maybe this means that. And it's a good point that they haven't, seemingly haven't approached him about restructuring it all. Gute did make somebody asked, about whether Jaire has expressed wanting to go somewhere else. And Gute said, no, he loves Green Bay. He's never said anything otherwise. That's another point to me. That's just like, man, I just don't see the urgency in making a decision on this. And that's why I see it as being a little bit easier to say, let's see what free agency looks like. Let's see what the draft looks like. And obviously they report they're going to be open to conversation for trade. I don't think that's even news. I think that was already sort of self-evident. The Rasul Douglas trade, again, that's one we've talked about a lot, right? Like, that's mid-season. You're thinking like that was kind of a bad time, and they got the right compensation, so they pulled the trigger. I think that they'll do that at any time. So other teams know that Jaire's probably somewhat available. So yeah, there's probably conversations about that. I don't know that I believe many reports beyond that, just because we know the nature of this time of year in the NFL. It's a poker game between 32 GMs, right? So anything they say is going to be dissected. It's like, oh, does he mean that or does he mean this? And so like they're all kind of putting little half truths and things out there. So I sort of, the whole idea that, well, no, nobody's going to give anything for him, I just reject that. I don't think that there's a GM there's not a single GM out there that wants to offer even like a day 3 pick for that guy. Like, there definitely is. Like, but what's the Packers number? What's their mark for good compensation? And I think that's where you'll find the disconnect. The Packers might be at a place where they say, look, we're not taking anything less than a 2 for Jaire, but the best thing that they're getting is a 3. So they say, fine, we'll keep him. That's the real question that you got to figure out. What's that line to them that's worth keeping him versus, letting him go? I don't think they'll release him. That doesn't make much sense to me at all. We'll see. There's no urgency. We've talked about that last episode too, that there's really there's nothing forcing a deadline here. There's, the contract's there. They can afford his contract. Yes. Is it responsible to pay him that for the amount of games he's played? No, I agree. That's not responsible. And I think in good faith, yeah, if Jaire's going to hang around, he should take a pay cut or a restructured deal or something like that. I just think that maybe there's still more time for that conversation to take place because they can afford his contract regardless of what happens at this point. Like, if nothing happens, they can afford it, right? Again, is it responsible? No. Can they afford it? Yes. So I just don't think that there's anything forcing that. I think that you'll figure out what you can get and then go from there based on what you can get. If for whatever reason, what's that? The top DB, the one from Michigan,
Will Johnson.
Yeah, for whatever reason, you can get Will Johnson. You're in position where you could draft him, and you're able to draft him. All right, well, now maybe you're a little bit more willing to move Jaire. It's like, all right, well, we got bodies. We got a premium pick here. We got some other guys that we got Nixon. We like him. He's got good leadership, veteran leadership. It makes more sense. But if you aren't able to get somebody you're comfortable with in the draft like that, then I just think you need the body more than anything. Why get rid of a body at this point? We've beat this subject to death. I just love talking about it because it is so it's hot. It's a hot topic on Packers Twitter, and everybody's got a charged opinion about it. So it's kind of fun.
Do. And there was another hot topic that came up late last week, which came up and then it quickly kind of fell apart. But That was the report from someone in Seattle who covers the Seahawks. He's either, I can't remember if he's a blogger or a podcaster or whatever, that the Seahawks have been talking to some teams, one of those teams, the Packers, about DK Metcalf.
Well, they are in every conversation.
They are in every conversation. So, and then there were reports, Matt Scheinman, who covers the Packers for The Athletic, said his source said the Packers haven't even talked to them about Metcalf. Believe what you want to believe. The other Seattle guy went and backed it up and said, it's true. It's the Packers. And there's been other teams, the Patriots, that talked to him. And he's backing up his thing, saying it's probably not going to happen, but they talked. And then there's rumors, is it going to be a first round pick and a player and what it could be. But it was fun while it lasted, thinking about DK to the Packers. I don't think it's going to happen. I certainly don't think they're giving up a first round pick for him.
No.
Or a first round pick and Romeo Doubs. There's no way. If the price was a fourth round pick or third round pick, maybe I could see that. But they're not.
I could see them being willing to move a Doubs or a Wicks right now.
I think
not with a first round pick.
Right. Because I think Doubs is going to go into last year's contract, him and Watson. So if you're getting Metcalf, you're going to commit to Metcalf because he's also going in his last year's contract. If you're getting him, you're going to sign him. So then you're not going to sign one of Doubs or Watson or both of them. So it would make sense you put Doubs in there. But Doubs is a decent receiver. Like, any talk of Doubs in the first is way too much. Like, he's a decent receiver. If you're trading Doubs, then that draft pick should be a fourth rounder with him. Right?
At the most. We just got a little bit of a benchmark, and granted, contracts matter, context matters.
Yeah.
But Deebo Samuels gets traded to Washington for a fifth round pick. Washington has to absorb his contract, so that's why you get probably less compensation. But still, it's Deebo Samuel for a fifth round pick. That's it, right? Like, that's one player for one player. DK Metcalf is not that much better of a value than Deebo Samuel. He's a higher value. I'll grant you that, but not that much higher. If Deebo Samuel's worth a fifth, just in terms of straight up terms, I would say DK is worth no more than a third or a second, like maybe a low second. Just one for one kind of thing. But if you're throwing a player in there like a Doubs, like, look, if you've decided maybe you're not comfortable with Doubs' concussion issues or whatever it is,
right.
Maybe whatever he kind of freaked out about last season, that's still bubbling around, whatever it is, I could see them being like, all right, fine. We like Christian Watson. Yeah, he's injured, but he's a good leader. So we're going to sign him to an extension. We're going to get Deebo, or we're going to get DK. We're going to send out Doubs and they can re-sign him if they want. And, we'll just commit to this big man receiver group with Jaden Reed and Wicks kind of running in between. I'd be okay with that. I'd be totally cool with that. But yeah, if you're shipping Doubs out, it shouldn't be, I would say, with not even more than a 6th round pick.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're definitely the one of the reports was a first or something like that. There's no way they're trading the first for him, and they're not trading the first in Doubs for him. But yeah, I think Metcalf would make a lot of sense for them. I mean, I think he could do a lot of the Watson stuff while Watson's out injured, and then
and then when Watson's back, you've got two giant freaks right there.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And to believe what you want to believe, whatever report, I think there's at least a little bit of truth. Maybe the Packers went to him and said, hey, is DK available? The Seahawks said, no, not really. But, if he was, would you be interested, sort of thing? And I don't think it probably got very far. And, if Seattle doesn't really want to move him, yeah, they're going to ask for a first round pick and more. They're going to set a high price and make them an offer they can't refuse. And then if you do, then maybe they would move them. But they probably really don't want to move them unless they're blown away. So, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a conversation there or something, but I don't think it's gotten very far. I don't think it's anything that, like, we don't know about, and all of a sudden we'll wake up tomorrow and DK Metcalf is a pack. I mean, maybe we will. That would be cool, but
it's kind of how it happens, right? We just get this news out of left field.
But I don't, I think there was probably a conversation that didn't go very far, but they would be interested if he was available. It would be cool, and I think I like the fit, but Not expecting that to happen.
No, I'd probably agree with that. I don't think I'm expecting it to happen. It would be cool. I could see the fit. But yeah, it's one of those that I have a hard time imagining that the Packers and the Seahawks are aligned on what DK Metcalf's value is.
And don't forget, if you trade for him, you got to pay him.
Exactly, and that's the thing. So you're telling that to Seattle, they're going, he's a big deal, big player, talented guy, really good, and you're like, yeah, but I got to pay him, and I got other guys here that I'm going to pay too, and our buddy R Showers here gets it. Metcalf disappears a lot, and anybody who's drafted him in fantasy probably feels that too. So yeah, I would think that there's a disconnect between the values that each team has, and that's going to be a lot of what goes on right now. And most of the time, those things don't get forced until draft day comes around, and you got a little bit more of a sense of urgency when you could have a shot at getting your guy, right? Like, oh, hey, our guy's falling to us on the board. Let's make this trade now, and let's just do it to go get this guy. You can't operate with that level of certainty until you're in the draft, So I think there's a lot of posturing taking place right now. Conversations like you're saying, they take place. Like, well, what if he was available? And you're like, and it just kind of primes the pump. And they're like, all right, well, if he's available, they said that they'd be interested, and they said that they'd be interested. So, we got a few interested that could work. And maybe that gives you an idea of who your draft trade partners are. So when they're on the clock, it's like, hey, they said they're interested in DK. We'd really love to get up there. Let's throw DK on the table. See if that I think is what's happening right now. It's that again, it's posturing. It's figuring out who's where, who's, and that's probably the same thing what's going on with Jaire. There's a little bit of kicking the tires, a little bit of like, hey, you guys interested? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe not, and other teams would much rather the Packers release Jaire Alexander if they want him, because then they don't have to give up any picks, so that there's all these motivations that are flowing around right now. And, deadlines get deals done, right? There's no deadlines right now. No deadlines on anybody for these things. So we're going to get a lot of chatter and rumors and smoke, and we're just going to have to see if there's maybe some fire there. I think there is in these conversations, but, what gets things done is deadlines. And right now we don't have a deadline. So free agency will get going. I think that might kick a few things off. We did see Darius Slay is going to be released. Now that's an interesting one. I think that one contributes to the market a little bit if you're looking for a veteran cornerback. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I think there's still a lot to be figured out. Obviously, we're still early in the offseason. But there's a lot of exciting potential out there, and I saw I won't recall who tweeted this, but I saw somebody today tweeted something about basically Packers fans being bored in free agency. And it's just like, yes, when Ted Thompson was alive. It's been a few years since that was the case.
Yeah.
So no, we're not bored. We're not bored right now. There's plenty of things to be excited about and looking forward to. I mean, we were sitting here last year going, gosh, there's just no way they would sign Josh Jacobs. They've never signed the top free agent running back in the market. That just sounds ridiculous. And what did they do? They went off and did that. So,
well, Xavier McKinney,
McKinney, yeah.
For a little while there, we knew they signed Jacobs. We thought they were going to have Jacobs and Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
And then it came out that Aaron Jones was getting it. I'm not bored with with Ted, you could ignore free agency. It was right to the draft, and yeah, they never did anything, or rarely did anything with Ted. But yeah, Gute's active, especially when he has cap room. We went,
which he has more now than he has in recent years.
There were a couple of years there where he didn't, because he was trying to keep these guys together to run it back and make another run with Rodgers' crew. They got cap room now, and they can go out and do what they want to do really in free agency. Yep. And I think they're going to try to. I don't think it's a very good class, and we can talk about this next week. But I don't think it's a very deep class. I don't think it's a very good class. There's a lot of guys out there with injury and age issues, but there's some guys out there. And I think there's a couple at the top of the market that they could pay money to, and it wouldn't surprise me. And then there's some value guys. So, yeah, they're going to be active. They're going to add a few players. So we'll
And
see.
it
I don't. It's not going to be
next week, right?
Starts.
So
the 10th is Monday. The 10th is when they can start that negotiation window. So
okay, cool.
That's
so
really
we'll have some juicy stuff to talk about this time next week.
Yeah, we may know who they're signing already because that
Yeah.
negotiation window is really the start of free. But then you can't officially sign till the 12th, 2 days
Right.
later. So,
Right.
But yeah, we might have some free agent news next week.
All right, Tim, put your Gute hat on, man. You get 3 moves to make. Which moves are you making right now in the offseason?
Well, why don't we limit it? I'll limit it to free agency for me. How about that?
Okay.
So I think they're going to add a pass rusher. I think they're going to add an edge rusher.
Okay.
I could see them going Josh Sweat. I know he's going to be at the top of the market, but I could see it being Josh Sweat. I could see it being Khalil Mack. I know he's older and they don't usually sign guys, but I think he's still
a qualified exception.
Producing. Yeah, he's almost kind of like their Julius Peppers. So I think they're going to add a pass rusher. I think they're going to add a corner. What would the other move be? I don't think they're not getting a number 1 receiver. I'll say that because I think the only one that's going to be available is Davante Adams. I don't think he's coming back. And then the rest, there's no other number 1 receivers. So if they add a receiver, I think it's going to be a specific kind of need, which could be a speed guy. So maybe they add a speed receiver.
Okay. I think I'm gonna go directly against you on this one. I'm gonna say my first move is I'm signing Davante Adams as soon as he gets released. Because
I would love it. I just don't see it happen.
He's gonna get released, and he's gonna sign a hometown deal because he wants to go back to Green Bay, but he can't openly say that. So we're signing Davante Adams. We are going out and getting an edge rusher, like you said, probably like a Josh Sweat, because that's how we do it when we know we're going to go after another edge rusher in the draft in Shamar Stewart. There's my 3 moves right there.
Okay. Well, I like them all. I hope they all happen.
So, yeah, there we go. Those 3. We're bringing in Davante, and we are just doubling down on pass rushers, veteran and rookie. Bringing them all in.
I love it. You can never have enough pass rushers. Give me all the pass rushers.
Yes, all the pass rushers. And then somewhere in there, there's a universe where we acquire not just Max Crosby, but also Myles Garrett.
We get them all.
Oh, man, we get everything. We get everything we want because we call all the shots, and we're smarter than Gute. But no, I'm kidding. We love Gute. He's doing a good job. Nobody's perfect, but I think he's doing a pretty good job.
Yes.
But yeah, hey, we've gone a little bit long on this one. We definitely covered the combine. We appreciate you guys in the comments. You guys had some good stuff flowing through, some good information on players at the combine this week. So thank y'all for hanging out with us tonight, listening and subscribing. If y'all have not yet done so, please get over to the Packers Talk YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button. That is a big deal for us. It only takes you a couple seconds, very low effort thing. You can go do it like right now. And we just absolutely love y'all for that. We'd love to see you guys back here with us next week. We're going to be covering, I don't know which position groups yet, but a couple of position groups from this draft class. We're going to dive in, we're going to show who we think the Packers might be most interested in at those position groups. And we're going to have some fun going through all of the free agency frenzy stuff that'll be flying inevitably this time next week. So y'all come hang out with us again this time next week, Packers fans. Monday night, 9:30 Central. Be streaming live on YouTube. We'll see you then. And of course,